It's week 4. We're going to look at Rachel and Leah and their relationship. So if you want to turn to Genesis chapter, I'm going to bounce around a little bit, but we're going to be in chapter 29 to start with. Very interesting once you get past the actual account of some of these ladies to see the dysfunction. I'm not trying to beat up on them, but it points us all the more to our need for grace in our lives, because we all start out at this deficit, needing God's grace. So where we left off last time, we were talking about Rebecca and how she felt she had to manipulate things to get God's prophetic word to happen for her son, her favorite son, and it cost her. Jacob has to leave and go to Uncle Laban because Esau's vowing to kill him. And there's no record here of her being alive once Jacob returns several decades later. So it costs her to be able to see her son. So he goes, and we're not going to get into the account of his journey, as fascinating as it is, but he gets to his destination. And we're going to start with verse 9 of chapter 29. He's at a well. There's shepherds coming to this well to water their sheep. And he's not quite sure where he is. He doesn't have GPS. And there aren't any posts probably in the ground saying, Laban's house this way, but he's making his way there. And he's speaking to the shepherds. He's like, why haven't you watered the sheep? And he's like, we don't do it until all the sheep are gathered. And they point out in verse 6 that Laban's daughter Rachel is coming with sheep, so she's a shepherdess. So in verse 9, while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now this is interesting. This is something I never thought of. She's taking care of sheep. And what was Jacob known for? He was a quiet man who kept to the tents. Doesn't sound like he did a whole lot of shepherding. He might have overseen the operation, but it doesn't sound like he got his hands too dirty with the sheep. So anyway, it's just a side note. He used to hang around the tents. How much did he deal with livestock? He probably oversaw the shepherds or something like that. It came about when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother. Jacob went up, rolled the stone from the mouth of the well, and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. So here he is serving them, acknowledging them. And Jacob kissed Rachel, which is just an appropriate greeting in that culture, and lifted his voice and he wept. He realized, I've made it. I'm here. There's tremendous relief. Tremendous relief on his part that he found the clan he was looking for. And he told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and tells Laban. So Laban shows up, they embrace, they kiss, it's all lovey-dovey, it's all really good. Starts well, right? Starts really well. Laban declares him bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. He stays with him for a month. And Laban says to Jacob, you're my relative, but should I you don't have to serve me for nothing. Tell me, what will your wages be? So he's had a month to get to know Rachel. And we learn here in verse 16, Laban has 2 daughters. The oldest is Leah, and the youngest is Rachel. Now, in verse 17, Leah's eyes were weak. Now, we don't know exactly what they mean by that. It could be a variety of things. Okay, she could have an issue with blindness. She could have had Down syndrome. She could have just not been pretty. Okay? But there was some sort of deformity that made her not beautiful, not desirable to men. Laban's got an issue. He's going to have to marry her off. Who is going to pay a bride price for her? Nobody who these were arranged marriages. You're not going to go pick someone whose eyes are weak for your son, unless there's something else wrong with your son, okay? So Laban's got a problem. He's going to have to support her the rest of his life, right? So what do? You got to find her a husband. So keep that in mind. That's his problem. So he brings up, what are your wages going to be? And now verse 18, Jacob loved Rachel. No, let me go back and finish 17. Leah's eyes were weak, but here's the contrast. Rachel was beautiful of form and face. Okay? She was gorgeous. How do you think those two got along growing up? We're going to see that I don't think Rachel was like, oh, don't worry, you'll find somebody. You know, she wasn't like consoling her and loving her. She probably flaunted her beauty. We know that Leah will resent this, okay, is resentful of her sister. We know this. This is not a healthy dynamic. So, you know, Jacob and Rachel were in love. He says, I will serve you 7 years. In other words, I'll indenture myself to you. He become an indentured servant for 7 years in exchange for Rachel. Now, why would he do that? When the servant was sent to get Rebekah, what did he bring with him?
A dowry.
The dowry, the bride price. What did Jacob bring with him? The clothes on his back. He's got no means to purchase the bride. He's got no dowry. He's got no bride price. So what's he got to do? He's got to offer himself. Okay? So there's 7 years. And Laban says, it's better that I give her to you than to some other dude. So stay with me. He serves 7 years for Rachel. It seemed to him like but a few days. So he waits these 7 years. He serves. They don't get married to the end of the 7 years. Okay? Now we know the story. Confident everyone in here knows this account. That they have the wedding feast. I think Jacob gets a little snockered. I think there's a good chance he gets a little snockered. Now the bride would be covered with a veil too. Okay, you'd only but see the weak in the eyes. You'd think you know. Okay, but somehow Laban, again, you know, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We know how Rebekah was good at making the switcheroonie with Esau. She had to learn it somewhere, so he pulls the ultimate switcheroonie. And, you know, he goes in and has relations thinking it's Rachel, but it turns out to be Leah. And he is hotter than hot. You know, and he realizes what's going on here and says, what did you do to me? You know, verse 25, you know, he realizes it's Leah. What have you done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then did you deceive me? Ah, the heel catcher has encountered his match, hasn't he? Laban says, he's going to fake this one. He says, not in our culture. It's not in our practice, in our place, to marry off the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, okay? Remember they had a marriage week, 7 days. Complete her marriage week. Have relations with her for the week. And I'll give you the other one if you serve me another 7 years. He's got to pay another bride price. Now he doesn't. Now when I was younger, I would think, oh, he had to wait 14 years for Rachel. No, Rachel was given to him at the end of that week, but he still had to serve the extra 7. Okay. All right. So Jacob did so, completed her week, and he gave his daughter Rachel as his wife. Do you see? It followed right on the heels. So the two of them, Leah gets a husband for a week. Okay? She's happy. She's never expected she's going to get a husband. She's happy. My husband will love me and all this. And Leah, Laban also, the maids were given, okay? Each one had a servant, okay? Well, they'll come into a factor as we move along. So Jacob basically moved in with Rachel. Leah's got her own tent. Okay, he's completed the week with her, but he loves Rachel more than Leah. Okay, and it's obvious. Can you imagine that situation? He did not willfully go into this situation, okay? He did not bargain that he was going to get sisters for wives and that they would be at each other all the time. Now, verse 11, or 31, excuse me. I don't have strong enough glasses on. The Lord saw that Leah was unloved, so he opened her womb. And again, remember, in that culture, women were baby producers. That's what life was about for them. Having children, producing sons, producing daughters. That was the big deal, okay? So Leah immediately gets pregnant, and she gives birth to Reuben. Now, verse 32, what is she hoping this son will do? Because the Lord has seen my affliction, what?
Now my husband will love me.
Now my husband will love me. You see how her heart aches over not being loved, being rejected. Her whole life, because of her lack of beauty, she's known nothing but rejection. And now she finally has a husband. And now he's rejected her for who?
Her sister.
Her nemesis, her sister. So because she has a son and she's fertile, Jacob continues to take, I don't say advantage, but he continues to go into her, at least for relations. And she conceives again and bears a son. And she says, because the Lord, now this is because she's now understanding the God of Jacob. Because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, she's still focused on that. He has therefore given me this son also, and his name became Simeon. Again, she's perhaps shifting a little bit of her focus from her husband loving her to what? Her kids loving her. If I can't get love for my husband, well, at least I have my boys now. My boys will love me. So in verse 34, again, she conceives and bears a son. And what does she say? She's still holding out hope here. Now this time my husband will what? Become attached to me. Because I have borne him 3 sons. And she names this one Levi. He's not attached. She knows he's only coming in to make her pregnant. She's basically nothing more than a concubine to him. Nothing more than someone who will produce babies. Okay? She's still holding out hope that somehow he will love her. In verse 35, again she conceives and bears a son. And this time I will what? Here's the switch.
Praise the Lord.
She's beginning to understand how God is mercifully providing her with children to love and to be loved by. And she's acknowledging him. And what's this one named?
Judah.
And what do we know about the tribe of Judah? Oh, come on, this is simple.
Is this the line of Judah? The line of Judah, yeah.
Jesus is the lion of the tribe of... This is the Messianic line. She's the mother of the Messianic line of Judah. She's also the mother of the Levitical line, the priests. Okay? But Judah is where she begins to see, I'm just going to praise the Lord. How fitting is it that the Messiah would come from that understanding of her giving birth to Judah? That wouldn't be nice if it just kind of stayed nice and cozy like that, but it doesn't. We see in chapter 30, now Rachel, tables are turned in their relationship, right? She's always had the top dog kind of position because she's had the beauty. What does Leah have that she doesn't have? A womb that works, which is actually a little more important than the beauty. So Rachel sees that she's not bearing children, and she begins to feel what?
Jealous.
Yeah, she's got jealousy brewing, big time. And she goes to Jacob, and she says, your fault. You're getting her pregnant. You're not getting me pregnant. You got to give me children. And he's like, oh, you vey. He's angry. He says, am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? Again, remember in that day, they didn't have the understanding that we have about fertility issues. They just presumed. Now, God opens and closes the womb. I'm not going to dispute that. But she pointed to Jacob, it's your fault. And he's like, no, it's got to be something wrong with you because God's mad at you. Okay?
Well, it was obvious that there wasn't anything wrong with him.
Yeah, obviously, you know. But she pointed the finger at him. It's not my fault, you know. And he's like, not my fault. So she does the whole surrogate thing. And she takes her servant. And again, in that culture, they were servants. They were basically, you're going to do what we tell you. And she gives him her maid, Bilhah, as a wife. And Jacob goes into her, and Bilhah conceives a son. And Rachel says, God has vindicated me through the surrogate. Indeed, he has heard my voice and given me a son. And she names him Dan. And she conceived again and bears a second son. With mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my who? Who she feels she's wrestling with? Her sister. They're going back and forth. Trust me, Jacob's not a happy man with all this Jewish contention going on here. I've wrestled with my sister, indeed I have prevailed. Now her sister would say, 2? I got 4. And I gave them birth. You only got 2 by your maid. Trust me, that's going on. And this one was named Naphtali. Leah sees that she'd stopped bearing, so she goes the surrogate route, gives him Zilpah. These poor women. And Zilpah goes in and bears him a son. And Leah says, how fortunate. Now, she hasn't gone back and said, my husband will still love me. She is still praising the Lord. You know, Zilpah bears that son and names him Gad. How fortunate. And then has another one named Asher. How happy. So fortunate and happy. How would you like to? It's like we got this dwarfs going, or the Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. Happy and talking, fortunate. Now here we go. This is how bad it gets. Verse 14. We're at the wheat harvest. Reuben's a young boy. He found some mandrakes in the field. He brings them to his mother. Rachel says, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. Okay? A mandrake, I believe, is a fruit. Okay? Some sort of fruit. These girls do not get along at all. At all. They're not nice to each other. This is not a healthy dynamic. She says to her, is it a small matter for you to take my husband? I had him first. She's never processed through forgiveness. She's never processed through any of this. They probably don't have a civil word between them. Would you also take my son's mandrakes also? You already took my husband. Now you want to take my son's mandrakes? So Rachel said, fine, you can have them tonight.
Wow.
It's basically what she said. Therefore, he may lie with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes. Ha, ha, ha. And he goes for it. She tells him, Leah goes to him and says, I've hired you. I've hired you with my son's mandrakes. That's all you're worth to me. You have to sleep with me. So he does. Yeah, isn't this ridiculous? This is like a really bad soap opera. So he lays with her and she conceives and she bears a fifth son. And again, she says, God has given me my wages because I gave my maid to my husband. I don't know about that. But anyway, Issachar becomes his name. She conceives again and bears a sixth son, whose name is Zebulun. And God has endowed me with a good gift. Now my husband will what? She still holds out hope that he will dwell with her, that he will spend more time with her, that he will favor her. He will dwell with me. He will see how good I am as a wife. And then after a side note, she bears a daughter, and Dinah will come up later in the whole situation. And it's at that point, she's had 6 sons, now some through Zilpah, but she herself, wait a minute, what did she do? Oh, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. She herself gives birth to 6, okay? And it's at that point that we see in verse 22 that God remembered Rachel and gave heed to her cry and opened her womb. She conceives and says, God has taken away my reproach. Because this whole time, trust me, Leah was telling her how awful she was because she couldn't have kids. This dynamic is really messed up and really sad. So she names him Joseph. We're going to jump ahead in the account. Where do I want to go here? I may just summarize for the sake of time, but we know that on the way, why did I not put that text in there? All right. Jacob leaves Laban. It doesn't. The departure from Laban doesn't go so smoothly. Laban realized he was being blessed because of Jacob's presence. So Jacob tells his girls and his wives and kids and says, we're leaving. And what does Rachel do? She takes something with her.
Idols. Idols.
Yeah, she took, quote unquote, household idols from her father. Okay? These were girls that were raised not up under Yahweh, but raised up under the idols, the lowercase g, the gods of the land they grew up in. I guarantee you, Rachel had been appealing, to the fertility gods of the place that she grew up in. Okay? She was not necessarily going to Yahweh, praying to him. She was praying to these fertility gods. Open my womb, open my womb. And she was afraid to let go of them. She's only had one son. Okay? She wanted to take them with. And so she steals them, puts them in her saddle, her camel saddle thing, and she pretends that she can't get up off of this because she's having her cycle, and her father says okay, and she gets away with it. But later on, Jacob, Robin, I did not mark things here as I should have. Later on, there's a time when Jacob, he moves to Bethel. Okay, this is shortly before the Lord changes his name. This is in chapter 35. Chapter 34. 35, I'm right. I got to get stronger glasses ever since they changed my contact script. Chapter 35, God said to Jacob, "Arise, go up to Bethel and live there. Make an altar there to God who appeared to you when you were fleeing from Esau." Verse 2, so Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, what? Put away the foreign gods which are among you. Purify yourselves, change your garments. They must have smelled ripe if you had to tell them to change their clothes. Let us arise and go up to Bethel. I will make an altar there to God who answered me in the day of my distress and has been with me ever since, basically. So they gave to him all the foreign gods that they had and the rings in their ears and different things, and he buries them under the oak which is near Shechem. And God put the terror of his holy terror on the people around them, so they were able to get to Bethel safely. And this is again where the Lord changes his name from Jacob to Israel. Go ahead.
Makes it so Jacob evidently knew that they had brought those idols along.
Yeah, he was putting up with it, okay, which he shouldn't have, which is compromise. So again, he said, we're making a clean break here, we're cleaning things up, we're moving, put away the idols, okay? She may have argued with him, if I don't have these, I won't get pregnant again, okay? Again, because that's what she grew up with. And we do know that Rachel becomes pregnant again, and that she dies along the way. Why am I having trouble here? I'm looking for where she's pregnant with.
It's got to be in 35 because it's done.
35:17.
Okay.
Severe labor.
Okay, thank you. All right. So they journeyed from Bethel, and they were on their way to Ephrath, which is really Bethlehem. Okay? They're on their way to Bethlehem. Rachel began to give birth. She suffered severe labor, and it came about that the midwife said to her, "Don't be afraid, you have another son." And it came about that her soul was departing, that she named him Ben-Onoi, another son of my sorrow, but his father changed it to Benjamin, son of my right hand. Verse 18, 16 and 18 of chapter 35. So Jacob set a pillar over her grave, that the pillar of Rachel's grave is there to this day. Actually, it still is. Okay, you can visit the memorial of Rachel. To my knowledge, it's still there. Look, I went to Israel 20 years ago. It still rattles in my brain that is still there. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to point out, because we see where Rachel dies, but we have to go over to chapter 49 of Genesis to hear that Leah, this is all the stuff has happened to Joseph. Jacob and those guys have moved back to Egypt. He's prophesied over his sons. And then
I don't know. What chapter again?
we're at 49, chapter 49.
Thank you.
So he calls them together. He charges them. This is verse 29 of chapter 49. I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is right before Mamre. And this is the best GPS coordinates he could give them. Mm-hmm. And imagine how many caves they had to figure out which one was which. In the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought from the field, along with the field from Ephron the Hittite, and buried there. There they buried Abraham, his wife Sarah. There they buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah. And there I buried what? Who? Leah. Leah was buried there in the field, in the cave that is purchased from the sons of Heth. So she died before they went to Egypt at some point. Okay, we don't know exactly when. But these were girls who never reconciled, who never really made peace. Leah made the most progress when she began to realize who Yahweh was. Rachel struggled. She really struggled all the way up. And I think the thing that we can take away from this is really, is it worth it? You know, is it worth the fight? Shouldn't there be reconciliation? Shouldn't there be an understanding like Rachel did, that true beauty comes from a gentle and quiet spirit, a loving spirit, a forgiving spirit. The fact that they wouldn't forgive each other created fertile ground for jealousy and spite and manipulation and conflict in marriage. Trust me, that was not a happy household in many ways. And that conflict passed on to the boys, didn't it? Because Leah's boys learned to hate Rachel's boy. He was the favored. He was the one that got the love. The others didn't. You see how that passed on through the generations. Oy.
So he
Not
was
healthy.
buried next to Leah, actually, and not Rachel?
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When at first it started.
Yep. When you look back on it, he was buried with Leah.
Wow.
It took death for her to be able to have him lying next to her. You know.
In the end.
Well, it wasn't because he chose her. He chose to be buried in the family plot. You had to bury in that day. You didn't embalm. You had to be buried quickly. She died on the way to Bethlehem, which again, it's interesting that it would be that place that she's buried. But nevertheless, a healthy family dynamic full of forgiveness and grace and truth is a whole lot better than what they had. You know. So anyway, let me pray. Father, I just thank you that you're more than enough for all that we need. And Lord, as we look at the struggles these ladies had, Lord, it really behooves us to make sure we're quick to forgive and not give in to a spirit of jealousy or spite, but rather to do our part to live at peace. And I just pray that our hearts would really be focused on being at peace with one another and truly showing love, grace, and forgiveness this week. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, ladies. Thank you. We'll see you next week.